Hello. This screencast is designed to introduce study of the text Frankenstein by Mary Shelley to students reading it at AS level, where at my school we study it as part of the OCR course. Obviously, I hope it's material that is useful for anybody studying the text, and even actually for students studying the text at GCSE level, particularly if they're aiming for higher levels. So I want to just start, as this is based on my students, with a very quick overview of the course of study. You're studying the OCR English Literature course, and if you follow the link on the page here in front of you, you can find the full specification of that course there. That will tell you all the texts that you can be studying and the complete format of the exam, although I will go through that briefly in the slides that follow. The information on this screencast is for one of the examination texts, that is to say the text of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And I want to just also stress that we will be reading it in the 1831 version, and you will receive texts of that version when you return to school in the autumn. You will be required to have a look at the earlier versions of the text as part of the course of study, if only because the course that you are studying emphasizes looking at the way prose has been written, as you can see on the screen in front of you, the narrative methods, the effects, the linking to interpretations. And interpretation of this text does change slightly over the sort of 10 or 15 years leading up to the 1831 version. So we'll need to study that. You can see here on the screen in front of you the other elements of the course. And at the moment, I won't confuse you by discussing the texts you're going to be studying, simply because these will be things that will become clear as the year goes on. This section B of the exam, as you can see again reading the slide in front of you, asks you to choose a question from a choice of two and answer on a single text, and it's said here what you are going to be looking at. You will also be asked to look at what is called a literary critical text, and again I will explain this in far more detail once we're back at school. But it's a text designed to help you understand how writers write the texts that you are studying. The exam is assessed in the prose section on all 4 of the current assessment objectives, and again, they're on the screen in front of you now. And you can see here that you are required in both AO3 and AO4 to look at not only comparisons between different literary texts informed by interpretations of other readers, in other words, how people view this text, and that would include an awareness of contemporary performance, whether in the theatre or in cinema, and we will spend some time looking at those. You'll notice, incidentally, on this screencast that each slide, or many of the slides, have got images either from stage productions or film versions that I like and that I feel are possibly going to intrigue you enough to start researching already. You will also see that in addition to everything you would expect as analysis, you are meant to be able to comment on the influence of the contexts, both of the writing, in other words, the world in which Mary Shelley lived and the issues and the background to her writing of this text, but also how they're received. How do we view them now? How have we, as a modern audience, responded differently, for example, to those of the Victorian period or whatever it might be. So I wanted in the second half of this introduction just to get you to start the process, and really at the end of each slide I suggest that you pause and actually spend some time undertaking the thought tasks that I'm putting to you. The first one comes up here. You might just want to think for a moment about the word Frankenstein. What does it mean to you? And while you're thinking about it, jot down almost like a mind dump. All the ideas that come to you, everything you can think of that relates to this idea of Frankenstein, so that we can begin to get an idea of the connotations of the novel, of the title of the novel. You will also be aware as you do this, possibly, of how some of the ideas that you may be having are very definitely relating to the late 20th, early 21st century, rather than earlier times. You might also, if you're not familiar with the text, just pause for a minute and try and remember from your perhaps films you've watched or the way the words are used, Frankenstein in this novel. Is Frankenstein the creator or the created? There's a lot of times in modern usage where that seems to get confused. When you've done that, you could then try a search of recent news, and the link I've put here should take you to an area of Google that if you enter the word Frankenstein, you will get recent appearances of that word in news articles. And I'd like you to think, and ready to discuss when we first meet back after this, why a novel that is nearly 200 years old carries such a resonance that the word Frankenstein is still used to the degree that it is. Pause now and work on these tasks. When you're ready, move the slides on. Now, welcome back. On this page, just quick comments about the course we're actually going to study and how we study it. The first point I want to be very clear about is that reading the text is not homework. It is expected and will provide a basis for discussion in most lessons. At least the first section of the novel, up to about chapter 7, must have been read by the start of lesson 3. I do not expect to have students reading the text for the first time in class. That way, you will not be able to engage in sensible and serious discussion as raised in the text. You will be set home learning tasks. They may be thought tasks, they may be research tasks, they may be writing tasks. But reading of the text is just expected of a student of English literature. I'm going to ask you to make notes, obviously, in lessons, and I have a notes page that I like students to use. And after every lesson, certainly twice a week probably, I'd like you to look back at your notes and summarise, you'll see in a moment what I mean, the notes that have been taken. Making sure that you add in your notes relevant AOs perhaps, technical lexis that you might need to remember. The notes page I like to use here with Herman Munster at the top of the page is one that looks like this. A page of A4 divided 2/3 and 1/3, and then down a further 2/3 and 1/3. So you have at the top of the page notes in whatever format you want, taken whilst we're reading. You might be writing mind maps, you might be doing a scattergraph, you might be doing all sorts of things. You may just be writing words. Then, in the middle tier, as it were, you write a summary of those notes, and that's often done, and best done, after the lesson, in your own time, as a means of helping yourself to remember and to recollect the notes you've taken. Organise it so that in your folders you can see at a glance what every page has been dealing with. At the foot of the page, this is where I'm saying key words. You might jot down the AOs that are particularly useful here, technical lexis, or anything that's particularly important on that page that you want yourself to remember. The next thought task here is one that will take you 15 to 20 minutes. I'd like to watch a short film clip and make some notes whilst you're doing so. You can use your first notes page. It's a lecture from the British Library about the Gothic. And as you listen to it, I'd like you to start to think about what you would expect Gothic literature to consist of. You might begin to also think about texts, perhaps modern texts, but other texts than Frankenstein, that would seem to you to fit the bill of this genre, the Gothic, being described in this film clip? A technical word in the final bullet point. It's important to understand the tropes of the Gothic novel. A trope is, if you like, the common identifying features of the Gothic novel. Many of them are in this little film, and I will expect you to be able to begin to talk about them confidently as a result of having watched this. Gentlemen, you're now ready to meet Frankenstein. I hope this has been helpful. Thank you.